In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's guest is someone I'm delighted to introduce. He's a forward-thinking entrepreneur and founder with over 2 decades of experience in the InfoSec industry. Under his leadership, his firm has guided hundreds of clients through security and compliance requirements, working closely with major financial, governmental, defense, and telecom organizations, among others. And they were recently named a top 10 security advisory services provider by Cybersecurity Review magazine. He currently sits at the helm of 2 ventures. He leads Consilium Labs in the audit and assurance space, and he is co-founder and CEO of GRSee Consulting Group. Please welcome Ben Ben-Aderet to the show.
Thank you, Natalie, for the introduction. Appreciate your kind words. Happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And Ben, we're here today to talk about your experience in driving change. And so I'd love to start by asking you, what do you think is the biggest misconception out there about driving major change in an organization?
Well, this is just my opinion, but I think that more often than not, people tend to think that, or the conception in an organization is that having a sound strategy is enough. And obviously, I don't think that's the case. I think strategy is a good starting point, but even while everything starts, while having a good strategy, you still need to be able to implement it and drive execution of strategy. So I think for me that's the biggest misconception. But if you taking into consideration that everything does start with a clear strategy that you need to put in place, there are so many other aspects of operations, human behavior, the needs and the wants of the many, market demands, and so on. The list just goes on. So obviously, just having a strategy is not enough. I think putting a strategy in place and expecting it to formalize, drive the organization forward without actively implementing and enforcing the relevant key elements is just wishful thinking. And I've done that, I've done that mistake a couple of times in the past as well, where I failed miserably, and I had to learn the hard way that you need to work hard at implementing the strategy, and sometimes you get the strategy wrong as well. Because at the end of the day, it's all about human beings at the core. This is my belief. Don't really like being told what to do. And once an individual is set in their way, driving change is hard. You need to work a lot on motivation as well as other, other factors to drive that change.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think I'm a big advocate for strategy and getting the right kind of plans and foundations in place, but really right execution and implementation in the right way is where the rubber hits the road. I'm curious why do you think that is? Why do people think that kind of the strategy will take them further than it actually does?
I think it starts with the comfort zone. People like to be in their comfort zone. They don't like to see change happening more often than not. Not all people, but again, I don't have the data to back it up, but I think most people, at least 80% of people just like, things to stay as they are. And, as leaders in an organization, you always, you want to scale the company, you want to grow, you want to, turn EBITDA to be higher than it is. You want to, implement new processes to make the company more efficient, more professional, and more often than not, in some cases, people just I think fearful for their spots and for their seats. That's what I think.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you talked just now about people being fearful or kind of not liking being told what to do. I'm curious, are there ways that have been effective for you in navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried and I'm still trying. I think you need to regard a few aspects in order to, more successfully drive change. Again, it's not a bulletproof system, but obviously you need to get a few stakeholders and you need to educate them on the merits of the strategy. You need to convince them that this is a good thing that we're doing here for everybody's sake. And you need to get them involved as early as possible in actually, building the strategy or even just, fine tuning it, because they need to feel a part of that process. And then you need to strive for things to trickle down onto the other members in the various teams of the organizations. There would always be naysayers in the organization. There would always be resistance for change, by people that they think they know better. They think if they could only do it their way, things would be fabulous. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with us as leaders, and we need to take to make the hard decisions. And and again, sometimes we might be wrong. We might put a strategy in place that would not pan out as successful as we think it would be. But still, I mean, once you're set on a strategy, try to drive it. Try to for the change to trickle down. Actively manage your stakeholders. Don't expect them to, don't expect just to by saying it once it will happen, change will happen. You'll need to create a system. You'll need to create like habits in the organization to drive change, in my opinion. You need to listen to them. You need to talk to them weekly, monthly, semi-annually. You need to put checkpoints in place, discuss KPIs, progress, and measure overall reception of the change in the organization. And even after the strategy has succeeded, you have to keep, in my opinion, measure and monitor the implementation of it, because again, it happened to me as well in the past. Once we drove a change in organization in the organization, we put a few processes in place, new ways of doing business. And if a couple times when I wasn't paying attention after we drove the change, and things reverted back to the old way of doing business. So yeah, I think ongoing monitoring is very important.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you raise an important point of how easy it is for people to kind of revert back to what they know, what they were accustomed to, what was easier. I don't know if you have a specific example that you're thinking of when you talk about that, but kind of anything that you kind of learned through that example that you could share.
Yeah, I mean, without getting into too much detail here, in one of my organizations, we used to have like a system of, creating an annual forecast of, income by customer or whatnot. And I was implementing that for a few years. And then when I had to take a step back, took a different role, things have, people just felt that, it's easier to do it a different way. And, in retrospective, when looking at it, it didn't work out as well, and we had to revert back 2 years after the change that happened.
Yep, yep. And then, as we're thinking about examples, curious to hear from you, what would you say is the biggest or most impactful change that you've driven in an organization?
Well, I mean, you have to consider I've been with my organization since day one, so over 15 years now. So there's been so many changes in the company that I drove and led. I think if we were trying to focus on just a single change, I think the biggest change and the biggest challenge as well was transforming my company from a single country, single culture type of company to a global organization. And just for context, I founded my company out of Israel in the year 2009. And then I spent the first 10 years growing the company in Israel, focusing mostly on the local market, few customers in Europe, and then customers in the U.S. as well started working with us back in 2000, all the way back in 2014. And in 2019, I decided to move and relocate with my family to the U.S. to build a U.S. side of the business. And it became pretty clear to me early on, once I moved here, that we need to be doing things differently if we want to be able to if we want to succeed in the U.S. market. I mean, the way of doing business, the way we create our quotes, and the way we deliver, the way we talk to customers, everything is different. So we had to adapt, and we had to drive a lot of, I mean, I had to drive a lot of changes. I was here by myself for the first year before I started onboarding, a few people to help me. Started off by, creating a support team for myself, mostly based out of the Philippines, doing a lot of admin work, very important work. And then, started onboarding local resources as well. But really, the reality pushed me towards change as a necessity. Was extremely hard. I was the only C-level here as well. So, it took me a couple of years to balance that out before being able to relocate a couple of my other C-level execs into the US. So, I mean, again, everything is different. Like how you onboard people, how you talk to them, how you talk with customers, how you sell, how you deliver the projects. The accounting, system is different here. Everything is completely different. So I think that change was the most significant one, and it actually, I think, it also helped us on the Israeli side of business, because we became we learned how to become much more efficient out of necessity. So we just adapted a lot of the processes that we've created here, and started implementing them on the Israeli side. Obviously, it's still it's still slightly different the way we do business here and in Israel, but yeah, I think that change drove significant value into the organization. And if I have to sum it up in one word, or probably the word would be streamlined. The organization nowadays, it's much more streamlined than it used to be. Again, out of necessity, but I think that's one of the things that really improved the business.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a big change, especially going from a smaller market into the U.S., where there's lots of different kind of sub-markets in the different regions and whatnot. I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, because I am often talking to companies, and we've worked with companies making a similar transition from Israel to the U.S. or from different European markets into the U.S. Can you talk a little bit more about what some of those differences were that you experienced, maybe as far as, cultural differences or kind of how you sell differently? Would love to hear a bit more from you about that.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, on the personal side, when you speak to a customer in Israel, it's very direct. There's no small talk. I mean, there is, but not as often and not as long as with the US customers. It's basically, a conversation can start, and your customer will just, dive into the weeds in it and just ask you directly, okay, what is this? Or what is that? How much will it cost me? And that's it. No, I mean, and as opposed to that, in the US, there's a lot of, beating around the bush. You're not as direct. You're talking with them about whatever it is, like anything from weather to family, if it's not, if there aren't any privacy concerns related to that. But so I think from a personal standpoint, it's much more mellow, like the way you talk to most. Again, I'm generalizing here, because the US is a huge country, as you know, and it's different, doing business in California as opposed to New York, as opposed to, California Bay Area versus California, Los Angeles. So it's different, but I think overall there's much more beating around the bush type of mentality before you get into the weeds and discuss the issues at the core of the matter. Whereas working with Israeli customers is mostly, just discussing the core, and then if we have time, we can talk about other stuff as well, in most cases. So I think this is one difference. The other one, like from a professional standpoint, We found that creating automations here really helped us streamline a lot of the processes. So we weren't used to that. We used to work very hard on each quote, each statement of work document, and coming here and encountering the volume that was needed. We needed to create a much more streamlined process. So we reverted into like off-the-shelf packages, off-the-shelf offerings. Obviously, we can still do some projects that are custom, but a big chunk of what we do could be classified as off the shelf right now. I would say maybe 50 to 60%, whereas in the past it was all custom tailored. So that helped us create a lot of automation processes in the way we generate quotes, the way we communicate with customers, integrating that into anything from, generation of quotes to the CRM to accounting. So across the board, the organization. More than that, I think the US market being so mature, customers are not as forgiving. So you need to deliver what you promised, and that's always the expectation, regardless of the country that you're in. But you don't have too many second chances in the US market, from what I got so far.
Yeah. I'm curious your view on sales and when to hire sales locally, because that's a conversation I'm always having with our clients around, do you get the business first and then bring on the local salesperson? Do you support sales remotely? So what was your experience, and was there anything you would do differently kind of second time around?
Yeah, I'm still struggling with that question, honestly. So we onboarded a few account executives recently. Not the first time that we're doing that. I think if you want sales to succeed, in my opinion, you first need to create the funnel, the top of the funnel, i.e., marketing, content creation, brand awareness. Because just having a sales rep, I mean, they could be as talented as they come. However, it's very hard to acquire, in my opinion, acquiring new customers if you don't have the infrastructure in place, i.e., partners, referral network in your networks, contents that you post online, brand awareness, going into conferences. So I mean, it's a good question, and I don't have, honestly, I wish I had a better answer or a better insight. But from what I've learned so far in the 5 years and a little over 5 years that I'm here, is that most of the sales, I mean, it's not really sales. Looking at it as sales in my space is wrong. If you talk to like my buyers, which are like chief information security officers, cybersecurity managers, directors, and whatnot, they consider companies such as ours, whether if we do a penetration testing project or PCI audit project or an ISO audit project, they regard us as partners and as trusted advisors. Now, trust takes time to build. So, doing sales the old-fashioned American way, where you have a salesperson that walks around with their briefcases, knocking on doors, that's not an approach that's going to get you anywhere. Cold calls will not work more often than not, again, in my opinion. So it's really a matter of working on personal relationship, cultivating personal relationships, and just be there, talk to people. And again, more often than not, an account executive or a sales rep, they work in quotas, and they're just looking for the next deal because they need to be meeting their quotas. So it's a good question to have, and I think unlike VC-backed startup companies that can just throw millions of dollars into marketing and SEO, SEM campaigns, when you run a privately held company, obviously your budget is not as expansive, and you need to think of other ways in doing business and driving sales. So for me, The focus was from day one, working on partnerships, getting to know people, talking to people, and, you know, uh, attacking from that angle. So I think I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think for me, I needed to start hiring sales reps only after we had some kind of a presence and some kind of a brand awareness, so they could
Yeah.
lean into.
Yeah, I think that's similar to the experience that I've seen many times. I think all the things that you're talking about, right? The brand awareness is an area where it's a bit hard to measure and it can feel a bit ambiguous, but so important, right? And I think of a salesperson selling into where there's no brand awareness is kind of an uphill battle versus if you have some knowledge about the company and it kind of helps pave the path to success, and thinking about that selling ecosystem so that you are giving that salesperson the support they need from marketing, from partners, from the executive team, kind of being out there. And I think that can go a really long way in building that trust that you were talking about, how important it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Curious, kind of fast forwarding a bit to today and where you are in the business. Wanted to hear, what are you focused on today? What are your priorities?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, I'm still at that place where I'm focused on building partnerships, building business development initiatives. So it took me a while to get the operations and going here, a few years to get the operations going, to hire local resources, to make sure that we have the structure that we need to have in place, to be able to deliver our projects and offerings. And right now, once that is kind of stable for the most part, I'm focusing my time on, the driving growth in the company. And the way I'm doing that is through moving up market. So trying to acquire as many SME customers as opposed to SMBs, which we've acquired up until now. We already have like a portfolio of SME customers, but for me, the main goal and the main challenge is actually moving up market, because as I just mentioned, um, you know, most of these customers or most of these, companies out there, they like to work with people that they know, with people that their colleagues know. And again, goes back to brand awareness, goes back to thought leadership, and building those relationships, as you know, takes time. It's not something that you could do within 1 quarter. Again, very different than like a VC-backed company that just creates a very well-oiled machine and just throws like an X number of BDRs and SDRs into the mix and just doing calls all day and focusing on very specific niches. We're looking for a more qualitative, long-term relationships. So it's all about building trust, and this is where I spend the majority of my time nowadays. It's still a challenge, it still, takes a lot of time, a lot of meetings, a lot of travel, a lot of conversations, but this is actually something I enjoy doing. So I guess that's okay then.
Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about what do you look for in a partner? What makes for a good partner? How do you vet that they're the right fit for your organization? What have you found works well for you there?
Yeah, so since we are in the cybersecurity and compliance space, there is a lot of customers out there that are just in it for, check the box type of exercise. And while sometimes we do partner up with these types of customers, but we partner up with them with the mindset of this is what they need now, and compliance and cybersecurity is just something that they will need to grow into as they grow and as they mature. So we like working with customer that we identify the um, the potential for growth and for maturity. We're not as happy with partnering up with customers that are just or companies that are just there for checking the box and that's it, because we don't feel that there are enough opportunities to present the value And for us, cybersecurity does hold a value intrinsic to it, other than compliance, other than just, getting a SOC 2 report or an ISO 27001 certificate that would just, appease the B2B partner that they're trying to do business with. So for me, we look for partners that value quality, value cybersecurity, and that are more mature in their posture and can distinguish between a check the box type of service and, just, hey, let's do this right. Let's actually improve the security posture of the organization.
Yeah. What do you think is behind those organizations that makes them want to find a true partnership and not check the box? Like, what is it? Is it they're at the leadership level? Is it kind of certain like demographic criteria? What have you found?
So first experience, once you've been around the block a few times and you've sat through a number of compliance projects and audit projects, you know what to expect, and you know that you're getting value for what you're paying for. Also, the maturity level of the actual manager or the stakeholders in the organization. So if, for example, a small company that just need to run a penetration test against their platform to satisfy a specific requirement, in some cases that might work well, without getting like any results because they just want to check the box. In other cases where the posture is a bit more mature and the stakeholders have been around the block, they want to know if they have issues. They want to know if there are any gaping holes or vulnerabilities because they care about their software, they care about their product, and they want to make sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. They're doing their jobs. So yeah, I think in maturity mostly and experience. I don't think it has anything to do with demographic, honestly. I mean, we have all kinds of customers, all demographics. So I don't think that's part of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think just hearing you talk, I think we have parallels with our own business, and I think it's right another service provider, despite being in a different function of the business. But right on the marketing side, it's companies that aren't only looking for kind of how many leads am I going to get or how many social media posts, but kind of a willingness to kind of make changes and bring the right people from across the organization in and really looking for that true partnership.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for everything that you've shared already. I want to flip things around a little bit and hear a little bit more about you. So can you talk a little bit about your background? How did you go from kind of who you were as a child to where you were today? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. So, wow, where do I start? I'm 47 years old. I was born and raised in Israel. I only relocated to the U.S. when I was 42, so I'm Israeli through and through. So both my parents were born in Israel, but my dad actually immigrated. He grew up in Turkey, so he moved to Israel when he was 16. So growing up, we didn't have a lot. We had enough, and that was fine. But we weren't wealthy or affluent in any sense. And it became evident to me at a young age that I would need to rely on myself mostly. So I'm a planner. I don't know when I started to conceive myself as a planner, but I think as early as probably 17 or 18 years old, when I started thinking about the future. So the way it works in Israel, as you probably know, you have to go to, after high school, you go into mandatory military service, and then you spend at least 3 years there. Back then it was 3 years. I don't know how long is it now, maybe less than that. So you spend 3 years and then you go out, and usually you either travel or go to college or both. So I knew I needed to, I wanted to go to college, but I needed to get some funds to go to college. I didn't have any money for that. So I needed to create a plan for myself. So after doing, research, I understood that I realized that I wanted to be in the tech industry in Israel because that would allow me to, work save up some money and, get my college degree. And this is actually what I did. Back in the year 2000, I got into the tech industry by studying for a specific certificate that was very new at that time, a Microsoft type of certificate. It was called MCSC. That actually got me in the door for a tech company, and this is how I started my journey. Spent a few years as an employee in that tech company, and then transitioned maybe a year after that into the information security space. Back then, it was called information security. Now it's called cybersecurity, and held a few positions. And always I had I had this inkling that maybe I wanted to do something bigger than just work at a company and climb up the ladder. And at some point during the year 2008, I think, the opportunity came. I was working for a startup company back then, and I realized that we're probably not going to go anywhere. And I attended. Well, this is actually pretty personal, but I attended a kind of Kabbalah lesson that we're talking about, gaining your freedom in the context of Passover. And that basically dropped the dime for me. And I realized that now is the time to start my own company. It was just a few months, but it was probably March or April of 2009. And I just realized that I was 32 at the time, and I realized that, this is the time, because if I'm not going to do it now, I'm probably not going to do it after, when I have kids and after I get married and all that. So yeah, I gave it a go. I called my friend who's also a lawyer, and yeah, we registered the company. My co-founder joined me pretty soon after. We knew each other from previous previous company that we used to work for. Uh, yeah, so that's what drove me initially to start GRSee Consulting, which is my first company.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I like it sounds like you had a real decision point there around, if I'm going to do this, now is the time to do it, and then moving in with full force. I'm curious, I know it was a while ago now, but as you think about that year one and all the things you did as you were starting up the business, are there things you would have done differently? Are there things that you you would have done the same because of how they led you? What stands out to you now looking back?
Yeah, I mean, I always think back on the past and what I have done differently. I think what I would have done differently is try to get to the US earlier, even maybe to an extent, forming the company out of the US market, because it's just such a bigger market. And I'm at the end of the day, when I think of it right now, if I had the time, the 10 years I spent in building the company in Israel, like spend those 10 years, or a large chunk of these 10 years in the US, I think the company would have been better off right now. Would probably be much larger. And we just, the more time you invest in growth, I mean, it has a very specific correlation with the size of the market as well. And obviously the size of the US market is just tremendous. And so I think that would be, if I could do something differently, I would probably do that differently. Get to the US much earlier than I got here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also like, I'm sorry, but also like invest in yourself more, like study more, get as many. And I remember I had a college professor, I don't remember who that was, but he told us that, everything's going to be harder. You need to get yourself better prepared, get as much education as you think you need, just be on the cutting edge of everything that you can, because every, any edge that you would have, would put you in a better spot than your competitors and your colleagues as well. So I would probably have studied harder, investing more time in that, and I would I would have learned marketing, sales, business development much more like earlier on. And I would also recommend like focus on relationship building as early as possible, because at the end of the day, it's all about people. And most of the growth that we've experienced both here in Israel and elsewhere around the globe, uh, it's always someone that that knows you, that would like to do business with you, or to like to work with you. So yeah, I think building relationship is, you cannot spend enough time in that. It's just do it as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah. That's something I really ascribe to as well. I do find sometimes it can be hard to kind of find the time or kind of really keeping up with all the relationships that I want to. I'm curious if there are things that work well for you to do that.
Just for me, it just be myself, be as transparent as possible, you know, talk with people on the same level. Don't try to, I try not to, be condescending ever. I try to, just listen to people. That's very important. A lot of people don't like to listen. They like to talk. I like to, I try to listen first and then talk. And just get to know people, really show interest in the people you talk to. And because there's no real separation between business talk and personal talk. Once you get to know people, you talk about everything. And we're both in EO, which is an entrepreneurs organization, and you know that. So it's all intertwined: business, family, personal. So once people get to know you, they either like you or they don't. But if they do, um, you know, good things will happen. I mean, they would put you in touch with someone that might be in need of your services. They would recommend you. They would, talk to people about you. And yeah, again, as you said, it's hard. Sometimes you just want to take a break out of it all. I was just thinking that this morning, or I was just like, I need a break. Just too many things going on at the same time. But yeah, I mean, it's part of our lives.
Right, right. Well, that's part of, as leaders, and I guess everyone as a professional, everyone has their personal lives, their business lives, and needing to manage energy is something I've become much more attuned to, I would say, over the years in my career.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have any tips for that? Like for me, I know I need to get my, X number of workouts per week to just, keep my sanity.
Yeah, I would say for me, I've learned the importance for me of my morning workout, and specifically getting, whether it's a run, a bike ride, but kind of getting the adrenaline going. And uh, as much as I'm a podcast addict, I'm an audiobook addict, but trying to use that morning time to listen to music or something that kind of pulls my head away from business. And then looking at kind of where the energy comes from. And I think it can be really easy to, work through lunch or, just try to squeeze in another hour of work. But looking at what other things in my life give me energy, right? So depending on the time of year, gardening or a hike or time with family, and really making sure that I'm prioritizing those things. And sometimes even more so when things are busy, when it feels like it's hard to find that time.
Yeah, yeah. We have a very similar routine, I think. Morning workouts, used to run a lot, now not so much. Last time I ran a couple months ago, I saw a mountain lion on the trail, so I stopped running outside and I go to the gym instead now.
Yeah, you have some very different things on the West Coast in California than we do in the Boston area.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, you clearly are someone who reflects a lot, and being right in EO, and just the way you talk about how you've thought about the business. I'm curious, knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given your younger self the first time you were in a leadership role?
Wow. That's a good question. So obviously, as I stated, I mean, move into a bigger market earlier on. Focus more on training your leaders as well, like as early as possible. Um, and identify the fact that not all the people that you work with will be with you for a long time. So there's gonna be a need to create a core workforce or leadership team that would be there with you and part of the journey. And again, training is very important. Implementing processes and super early on is important. Especially now when I see all the challenges that we've been facing since post-COVID times, with the degrading workforce and quiet quitting and leadership challenges in how to integrate teams that never meet one another in person. So there's so many things. So I think be more focused on people. This is not my strong suit, I have to admit. I held a lot of roles in my organizations, and the last one was CEO, which I still carry that torch. But I think I am a people person, and I used to be a better manager. But at some point, once you do it so many years, I kind of took a step back, and nowadays I'm basically working with my C-level. I rarely interact with. I do interact with other people in the organization, but I don't manage them. So I think identify leaders in the organization. That's as early as possible. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have anything else that comes to mind at this point.
Well, I think that's some great advice and definitely resonates with me. So thank you for sharing that. But before we wrap up, Ben, can you tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, for sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all social medias, but probably most active on LinkedIn. Um, yeah, I rarely check the other ones. And so happy to, if you want, drop me a note. And I'm also involved with from time to time, with some mentorship programs as well. And if you reach out with anything, if you want to get an advice, or if you want to get into the industry, my industry, and if I can help in any way, please reach out. I'll try to do the best I can to respond. I usually do not respond to cold outreaches. If vendors are trying to sell me something, I just don't have the time to entertain all the calls that I'm requested to entertain. Yeah, but probably LinkedIn.
Sounds good. LinkedIn all the way. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Ben. It was really great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Natalie. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I know I loved hearing from Ben, how he navigated entering the U.S. market, how he thinks about selling and relationship building, and the importance that has. So if today's episode gave you any valuable insights, and I hope that it did, please share it with someone. As we know, spreading this kind of knowledge and information helps all of us grow as leaders and equips us to drive successful transformation and change in our organization. So thank you, Ben. And this has been another great episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.